Jimin couldn't hide it anymore. What he revealed about Jungkook made fans srm. The sound of shattering glass echoed across the dressing room just as Jimin whispered, with his back trembling, "I can't keep pretending anymore, Jungkook, not after what you did." The overhead lights flickered, casting long fractured shadows across the floor where broken pieces of a makeup mirror glittered like sharp silver ice. Jungkook froze mid-step, his breath catching, his chest rising and falling with something dangerously close to panic. Sweat glistened on his temples, though the room was cold. He hadn't expected this. Not today. Not from Jimin. The tension between them pulsed like a living thing, thickening the air until every inhale felt like swallowing smoke. "Jimin," Jungkook's voice was low, rough at the edges as though dragged across gravel. "You don't mean that." But Jimin finally turned around, and the devastation in his eyes made the room tilt. He looked like someone standing at the edge of a confession he'd been burying for years. Someone who had run out of places to hide. "Don't tell me what I mean," he said, his tone shaking but unwavering, like a flame in the wind refusing to die. "All this time, I held it in because I thought you needed me to stay quiet. But last night proved I can't do that anymore." Jungkook's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists, then loosened, fingers trembling in ways he couldn't disguise. He took a single step closer, boots crunching over glass. "What did you think last night meant?" Jungkook demanded, but his voice betrayed him, too soft, too desperate beneath the anger he tried to force into it. Jimin swallowed. The motion was small but full of fear, regret, longing, and something far more dangerous. "It meant," he said slowly, "that you're not as unaffected as you pretend to be." A muscle in Jungkook's cheek twitched. Jimin exhaled shakily, as though letting out a truth that had been suffocating him. "You looked at me like you were finally scared of losing something, and I realized maybe you've been scared for a long time." Jungkook's breath hitched in his throat. The room felt too small. Too quiet. Too full of things unsaid. "You think you know what I'm scared of?" Jungkook whispered, stepping closer again, the heat of his presence igniting every nerve in Jimin's body. "You think you understand why I've acted the way I have?" Jimin nodded, though he looked like he might break. "Yes. Because I feel it too. Every time you shut me out, every time you pretend it's nothing, my chest hurts like something's tearing." His hand hovered near his heart as if to keep it from spilling out. Jungkook's eyes softened, lashes lowering as he looked away for a fleeting second, unable to hold Jimin's gaze. Unable to bear the weight of being seen. "That's exactly why I didn't want this," Jungkook said, voice barely audible. "Because once you see me, really see me, there's no going back." Jimin's lips trembled. "I already saw you. Years ago." Silence wrapped around them, thick, heavy, impossible to escape. And for the first time, Jungkook looked like someone stripped of every shield he'd built. Someone vulnerable. Human. Frightened by the force of what he felt. "Jimin," he whispered, the name cracking like fragile glass on his tongue. "If you say what I think you're about to say, everything changes." Jimin breathed in, slow and unsteady, as though gripping the courage he'd been denying himself for far too long. The dressing room lights glinted in his eyes, catching the shimmer of tears he refused to let fall. "I know," he said softly. "But I'm tired of living inside a secret that was never meant to stay hidden." He stepped closer, close enough that Jungkook could feel the ghost of his breath. "What I revealed last night, what I'm about to reveal now. I've carried it until it bruised me." Jungkook closed his eyes, jaw clenched, bracing himself, and Jimin finally said it. "I wasn't protecting myself. I was protecting you." His voice trembled like a confession being ripped straight out of his soul. "You're the one I've been afraid of losing, Jungkook. You're the reason I stayed silent. You're the reason I can't anymore." Jungkook opened his eyes slowly, and the storm brewing in them was unlike anything Jimin had ever seen. Fear, longing, anger, love, all twisting into something raw and unguarded. For a moment, Jungkook didn't speak. He simply reached out, very gently, brushing a piece of shattered mirror away from Jimin's foot, his fingers trembling. Then he lifted his gaze and whispered, almost inaudible, "Then I guess I should finally tell you what I've been hiding too." No one in the room moved. Time felt like it held its breath, and Jimin realized whatever Jungkook was about to say would rewrite everything they thought they knew about each other. But he didn't step back. He didn't run. He stayed. Eyes steady. Heart open for the first time in years. The room was too quiet. the kind of silence that made every breath sound like a confession. Jungkook's fingers hovered in the air, inches from Jimin's wrist, trembling as if touching him would set the whole world on fire. He hadn't moved since the moment Jimin said the words that still echoed in the charged air between them. Jimin watched him carefully, every muscle tight, every heartbeat loud enough to drown the faint hum of the air conditioner. The fractured mirror on the floor captured the light, scattering it across their faces like broken constellations. It made everything feel unreal, like they'd stepped out of time. Say it, Jimin whispered, not because he wanted to push Jungkook, he was too scared to, but because he needed the truth more than he needed air. Jungkook exhaled hard, his chest rising sharply. His voice, when it finally came, was rough and low, as if dragged from somewhere deep and painful. "You want the truth," he said, stepping closer until Jimin could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Fine. You should know it's not something I can take back." Jimin didn't move. His throat tightened, but he held Jungkook's gaze. Jungkook lifted a hand and brushed his fingertips against Jimin's jawline, lightly, hesitantly, as though terrified Jimin would pull away, yet unable to stop himself. Jimin's breath hitched. The touch was soft but charged, like static crawling under his skin. "That look in your eyes last night," Jungkook whispered, "the one that said you saw right through me. I felt it. I've always felt it. That's what scares me." Jimin swallowed, the movement subtle but intense in the heavy silence. Jungkook's thumb traced slowly along his cheekbone, a touch too tender, too intimate, too dangerous. "I never meant for you to see how much you affect me," Jungkook continued. "How much control you have over me without even trying." Jimin's lips parted slightly. He hadn't expected Jungkook to say it so directly. Not after years of half-truths, guarded emotions, stolen glances that neither of them admitted meant anything. Jungkook leaned in until their foreheads nearly touched, the faintest brush of skin sending a shiver through both of them. Jimin could hear Jungkook's breathing uneven, shaken, betraying everything he tried to hide. "I don't sleep well when you're angry at me," Jungkook said, voice trembling. "I can't focus when you're distant. And when you look at someone else like they matter." His jaw tightened. "It makes me feel things I shouldn't feel." Jimin's heart twisted. The sharp vulnerability in Jungkook's tone cracked something open inside him. "You think I don't feel the same?" Jimin whispered back, barely able to speak. "Every time you look away from me, The door slammed open. Both of them flinched apart instinctively, as though guilty of something unspeakable. A staff member peeked inside with wide eyes, clearly sensing she had walked into something she shouldn't have. A Jimin sigh, Jungkook sigh. "You're needed in 5 minutes. Are you both okay?" Jimin forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yes. We're fine." She hesitated, glancing at the broken mirror on the floor, the closeness between them, Jungkook's hand still half raised. But she said nothing and slipped out quickly. The door clicked shut again. Silence returned, heavier than before. Jungkook dragged a hand through his hair and let out a shaky laugh. "We're terrible at hiding things," he murmured. Jimin looked down at the shattered glass. "We've been hiding too much. We can't slip like that in front of people," Jungkook said softly, but there was no anger. Only fear. "They'll start asking questions." Jimin stepped closer again, unwilling to let the moment dissolve. "Let them," he whispered. "I'm tired of pretending I don't care more than I should." Jungkook froze. Those words hit him harder than any confession he'd prepared for. His hands clenched at his sides, knuckles whitening, breath shuddering out of him. "You don't know what you're saying," he muttered desperately. "Yes," Jimin said, voice firming. "I do." He reached out, very gently, and touched Jungkook's wrist. Jungkook flinched, not pulling away, but as if the touch burned in a way he couldn't defend against. "Last night," Jimin continued, "when you grabbed my hand and told me you didn't want me leaving with anyone else, do you think I didn't understand what that meant?" Jungkook inhaled sharply. "I was drunk. You were honest." Jungkook opened his mouth, then closed it again. His eyes flickered, emotions storming through them, fear, desire, resentment, longing, regret, all tangled into an expression that made Jimin's heart ache. "You think this is easy for me?" Jungkook said, voice cracking. "You have no idea how long I've tried to control myself around you." Jimin stepped closer still. Their chests nearly brushed. "Then don't," he said. "Don't control yourself right now." Jungkook's breath stuttered. His gaze flickered from Jimin's eyes to his lips and back again, fighting a war inside himself. The air between them tightened, dense with heat, unspoken confessions, and the kind of tension that could ruin everything. Jimin, Jungkook whispered, warning and plea tangled together. Jimin didn't back away. Tell me what you wanted to say earlier. Tell me what you've been hiding. Jungkook closed his eyes as though trying to steady himself, but when he opened them, something raw and fearless flickered there. He said, voice trembling but unbreakably sincere. It's always been you. Jimin felt the words hit like a shockwave, knocking the air out of his lungs. Something inside him, something that had been aching for years, finally exhaled. The world suddenly felt clear. Sharp. Real. Before either of them could speak again, the staff voice called out from the hallway, Jimin sigh, Jungkook sigh, 2 minute. Jungkook exhaled shakily. We need to go. We'll finish this later, Jimin said softly. Jungkook looked at him, really looked, and nodded once, almost imperceptibly, but full of meaning. They walked toward the door together, their shoulders brushing, their breaths unsteady, both of them knowing that nothing between them could return to the way it was. Everything had changed. But neither of them was running anymore. The cheers of the crowd were still echoing against the stadium walls when Jungkook caught Jimin's wrist in the darkness of the backstage hallway. It wasn't rough, but it was firm enough to stop Jimin mid-step, firm enough that Jimin felt the tremor under Jungkook's skin. Not yet, Jungkook whispered, breath warm against the back of Jimin's neck. We're not done. Jimin froze. The adrenaline from the performance was still pumping through his veins, making every sensation sharper, every touch more electrifying. He turned slightly, catching a glimpse of Jungkook's face in the dim emergency lights, eyes dark, lashes damp with sweat, jaw clenched like he was fighting himself. What do you want to say now? Jimin asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Jungkook didn't answer. Instead, he tugged Jimin deeper into the shadows, away from staff, footsteps, cameras, away from the world. Jimin didn't resist. The door to the small equipment room clicked shut behind them, and then Jungkook finally spoke, his words low and unfiltered. You think I don't see the way people look at you? The jealousy in his voice was unmistakable, inflamed, unhidden, dangerous. You think I don't hear what they say? What they want from you? Jimin swallowed, pulse racing. Why does it matter to you? Jungkook stepped closer until Jimin's back met the cold metal shelf, boxes rattling softly behind him. The proximity made Jimin's breath hitch. Jungkook's chest rose and fell against his, the faint scent of sweat and cologne wrapping around them like a cage. Because, Jungkook said, voice shaking with restraint he no longer had, I hate it. Jimin's heart flipped. Hate what? When someone else thinks they have a chance with you. Jimin's breath caught. Jungkook had never said it so plainly before, never allowed the depth of his possessiveness to slip through his defenses. Jimin tilted his head slightly, letting their foreheads nearly touch. You can't control who looks at me. I know. Jungkook's jaw tightened. But I can control what you look back at. Jimin's eyes widened. You don't get to. Yes, Jungkook cut in, voice dropping even lower, I do. The words brushed over Jimin like heat, chilling and burning all at once. He felt his knees weaken but forced himself to stand his ground. You're being ridiculous, Jimin whispered, though the tremor in his tone betrayed him. Jungkook leaned in, his breath grazing Jimin's cheek. Then look me in the eyes and tell me you don't feel it too. Jimin's lips parted, but no sound came out. Jungkook's hand slid from his wrist to his waist, fingers tightening just enough to draw a shaky inhale from Jimin. Tell me, Jungkook murmured, that what happened last night meant nothing. Jimin's chest rose sharply. I never said it meant nothing. Then what did it mean? Jungkook's voice was raw, almost desperate. Because I haven't stopped thinking about it. I haven't stopped replaying the way you looked at me. The way you. He cut himself off, breathing hard. Jimin felt something sharp and fragile unfold inside him. I thought you regretted it, Jimin admitted softly. Regret? Jungkook repeated, almost laughing. I regret not saying more. The tension snapped like a live wire. Jimin's heartbeat pounded so loudly he was sure Jungkook could hear it. Then say it, Jimin whispered. Jungkook's eyes darkened, but before he could speak, footsteps echoed down the hall outside, staff calling names, equipment being dragged. Jungkook cursed under his breath and stepped back, raking a hand through his hair, trying to regain control over emotions he'd just let crash out of him. Jimin exhaled shakily, the sudden distance between them making the room feel colder. We should go, Jungkook said, though his voice was anything but steady. We're not finished, Jimin replied. Jungkook's gaze flickered to him, heavy with everything he wanted to say but couldn't. Not here, not now. I know, Jungkook murmured. They left the room one after the other, but the charged air between them followed like a shadow. Later that night, long after the staff had gone home and the building had gone silent, Jimin sat alone in the practice room. The lights were dim, his reflection faint in the wall-to-wall mirrors. He replayed every word Jungkook had said, every heated look, every touch that lingered longer than it should. He was so lost in thought that he didn't hear the door open. Jungkook's voice broke the quiet. I shouldn't be here, he said from the doorway, but I couldn't go home. Jimin turned slowly. Jungkook stood there in a hoodie and sweatpants, hair damp, expression restless and exhausted, like someone who'd been pacing for hours, trying and failing to calm the storm inside him. Jungkook walked toward him, each step deliberate. I realized something, he said softly. Something I've been avoiding. Jimin's pulse quickened. What is it? Jungkook stopped right in front of him, close enough that Jimin had to tilt his chin up to hold his gaze. When I said it's always been you, Jungkook inhaled shakily. I didn't say how long it's been. Jimin swallowed hard. How long? Jungkook's expression shifted, vulnerable, terrified, unguarded. Since before I even understood what I was feeling, he whispered. Since the first time you smiled at me like I mattered. Jimin felt his breath falter, a trembling warmth blooming deep in his chest. You could have told me, he said, voice weak with emotion. No, Jungkook replied softly. I couldn't. Because once I told you, I knew I wouldn't be able to hide anything anymore. He reached out, hesitating before letting his hand settle gently on Jimin's waist, and I was right. Jimin looked up at him, eyes shimmering. Jungkook leaned closer, his voice barely a breath. If I cross this line, I won't go back. Not ever. Jimin didn't step away. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. You already crossed it, he whispered. The room fell into a silence that pulsed with heat, emotion, fear, and something far deeper, something neither of them had words for yet. Jungkook closed his eyes, then opened them again, and the way he looked at Jimin, in that moment, was the truth he had never dared to speak. Everything had truly changed now, and neither of them was pretending anymore. The room felt too small for the way Jungkook was looking at him, too dim, too intimate, too fragile and explosive at the same time. Jimin could feel the vibration of his own heartbeat in his fingertips, in his throat, everywhere. Jungkook's hand still rested lightly on his waist, warm enough to burn through the thin fabric of his shirt, warm enough to make Jimin's breath stutter. Neither of them spoke at first. Silence pressed against the walls of the practice room, thick and restless, as if the air itself knew something irreversible hovered between them. Jungkook's voice broke through it, quiet but trembling with a tension that felt almost dangerous. You shouldn't look at me like that, he whispered, a faint edge in his tone. Jimin blinked slowly. Like what? Like you want the truth, Jungkook said, his fingers tightening ever so slightly on Jimin's waist. Like you're ready for it. I am, Jimin said. I've been ready. You're the one who ran. The flicker in Jungkook's eyes sharpened, hurt, anger, longing, regret, all tangled into something volatile. I didn't run, Jungkook shot back softly. I held myself back. Why? Jimin asked. Because wanting you was the one thing I couldn't control. The words hit Jimin so hard he couldn't breathe for a moment. His hands reached for Jungkook almost instinctively, fingers brushing the fabric of Jungkook's hoodie before hesitating. But Jungkook didn't pull away. He leaned into the touch, his forehead dipping until it almost met Jimin's. What changed your mind? Jimin whispered. You, Jungkook replied. You changed it. You always do. Jimin's breath shook. His hand slid up to Jungkook's shoulder, gripping gently, grounding himself because his knees felt dangerously weak. You said you realized something, Jimin murmured. Something you've been avoiding. Jungkook exhaled, shaky and uneven, like the truth hurt to hold. I realized. He paused, swallowing hard. I can't watch you slip away from me anymore. Jimin froze. Slip away? I never. Yes, you did, Jungkook cut in, voice soft but sharp. Every time someone else got close to you, every time you laughed with someone else the way you used to laugh with me, every time you let yourself trust someone who wasn't me, I felt it. He looked away as if confessing something unthinkable, and I hated it. Jimin's fingers curled against Jungkook's arm. You can't blame me for not knowing what you feel. You didn't give me anything to hold on to. Jungkook looked back at him, eyes dark and burning. I'm giving it to you now. Jimin inhaled sharply, his pulse picking up speed. Then say it. Say what you've been keeping from me. Jungkook stepped closer until there was no space left between them. His hand moved from Jimin's waist to the small of his back, pulling him just enough that Jimin's lips parted in surprise. You want me to be honest? Jungkook asked softly. Yes. Jimin breathed. Jungkook's nose brushed against Jimin's cheek as he whispered the words that unraveled Jimin from the inside out. I don't want anyone else touching you the way I want to. Jimin's breath caught violently. Heat surged through him, sudden and overwhelming. He felt himself sway into Jungkook before he could stop it. Jungkook, he whispered, barely able to form the word. Jungkook pressed a hand to the mirror behind Jimin's head, boxing him in without touching him more than he already was. His voice dropped lower, dangerous, unfiltered. When you're close to me like this, I lose every bit of control I'm supposed to have. Jimin swallowed hard, feeling his pulse throb against the edge of Jungkook's fingers. Then don't control yourself, he managed. Jungkook's eyes darkened, pupils dilating, breath deepening. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. Jungkook leaned in, mouth close enough to feel but not close enough to touch. Jimin's breath trembled in anticipation. Jungkook's voice dropped to a whisper that was barely human. I want you, he said. In every way I'm not allowed to say. The confession hit like a shockwave. Jimin's hand shot up, gripping Jungkook's hoodie, pulling him even closer as something fierce and desperate surged through him. You should have told me sooner, Jimin whispered, voice unsteady with emotion. I know. Jungkook's voice broke. I know. But if I said it back then, I would have ruined everything. Jimin shook his head slowly, eyes soft but burning. You're not ruining anything. Jungkook's expression shifted, hope flickering through fear, longing fighting with restraint. You think this is simple, he murmured. You think it won't explode in our faces? I don't care, Jimin replied. Not anymore. Jungkook inhaled sharply. Jimin continued, voice trembling but unwavering. If you walk away now, don't expect me to stay silent. I won't pretend anymore. I won't bury what I feel so you can keep hiding. Jungkook's breath hitched. I'm done protecting something that hurts me, Jimin whispered. If you leave, I'll let the whole truth burn. Jungkook froze. Those words hit deeper than anything Jimin could have said. A muscle in Jungkook's jaw twitched. His eyes softened, then darkened again, then softened once more as though he was fighting with every part of himself. Jimin, he whispered, don't say things like that unless you mean them. I do, Jimin said. Every word. Jungkook looked at him, really looked like Jimin had just shattered the last barrier he'd been holding onto. Slowly, Jungkook lowered his forehead to Jimin's, closing the tiny space left between them, and his voice, when it finally came, was barely even a breath. Then I guess, Jungkook whispered, I'm done running. The world outside the practice room went silent, and the two of them stood there, breathing the same air, sharing the same trembling secret, neither of them pretending anymore, neither of them hiding, neither of them willing to let go. Everything between them was different now, and for the first time, neither of them wanted to undo it. The storm outside had already died down, but inside the room the silence felt louder than thunder. Jungkook stood near the window, his breath unsteady, his eyes still carrying the heat of the argument that had exploded moments earlier. Jimin stood in the middle of the room, his hands trembling, not from fear, never from fear, but from the weight of everything he had held in for far too long. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jungkook finally turned, his voice low, unexpectedly fragile. If you walk away now, I won't stop you. But don't pretend it won't destroy me. Jimin inhaled sharply, the words hitting him deeper than he was ready for. You think this is easy for me, he whispered. You think I wanted any of this? To feel everything too much, to care too much, to get hurt over and over again, by you? Jungkook's jaw tightened, but he stepped closer, slow, cautious, as if fearing Jimin might disappear like smoke. Then stay, he said. Stay and we fix it. Jimin looked up, eyes glossy with a mix of anger and longing. Fixing it means you stop running every time things get too real. And you stop assuming I'll choose anything or anyone over you, Jungkook countered, his voice trembling. I'm tired of pretending I don't, he stopped himself. The truth hovered between them, raw and unfinished. Jimin waited. Jungkook finally exhaled. I'm tired of pretending I don't care about you the way you deserve. That silence, the heavy, electric kind, returned. But now it felt different. Less like a wall, more like a bridge. Jimin's voice cracked, softer than a breath. Then why did you push me away? Because you were the one person I couldn't afford to lose, Jungkook said. And that terrified me more than anything. The confession shattered the last bit of distance between them. Jimin stepped forward, so close now that Jungkook could feel the warmth of his breath. You almost lost me anyway, he whispered. I know. Jungkook's voice broke for the first time. And I won't let that happen again. Not after tonight. Jimin hesitated, searching his face for the truth, and for the first time he saw it. All of it. The fear, the longing, the stubborn pride, the unspoken devotion Jungkook had buried for so long it had started to rot inside him. Slowly, carefully, Jimin reached out and touched Jungkook's cheek. Jungkook closed his eyes at the contact, as if the simple touch was enough to steady him. We're a mess, Jimin murmured. We always were, Jungkook replied. But maybe this time we stop running from it. Jimin's mouth twitched into the faintest, saddest smile. You really think we can make this work? Jungkook opened his eyes, meeting Jimin's with a kind of determination that felt new, real, grounded, and not fueled by adrenaline or fear. Not think, he said softly. No. The tension in the room finally shifted, still intense, still warm, but no longer sharp enough to hurt. Something softer, deeper, began to fill the space instead. Jimin let out a long, shaking breath. Then don't break me again. I won't, Jungkook said. Not ever. The storm outside had ended hours ago, but the atmosphere inside finally began to settle. Slowly, gently, Jimin leaned his forehead against Jungkook's, and Jungkook let his hands rest at Jimin's waist, not pulling, not claiming, just being there. For once, there were no more accusations, no more running, no more half-buried feelings. Just them. Two hearts exhausted, bruised, stubborn, and impossibly drawn to each other, finally choosing the same direction. And as dawn began to creep through the curtains, casting soft light on the two of them standing together for the first time without fear, they understood it without needing to say it. This was their ending and their beginning.